ever feel like we're living through history like way faster than we can process it?
It's like every day there's a new headline that just throws you for a loop.
Exactly. And then you look back a few years, and it's like, whoa, how did we even get here? Which of what today's deep dive is all about.
Oh, going back in time. I'm intrigued. What are we looking at?
We're going back to 2016 to a debate that feels both strangely familiar and like a world away.
2016, huh? That was a year.
To put it mildly, we're diving into the transcript from the Munk Debate that year, and get this, the resolution was literally, be it resolved, Donald Trump can make America great again.
Wow, straight to the point, huh? And they were having this debate where...
They held it in Toronto, of all places.
Toronto, that's fascinating. You'd think a debate about making America great again would be, actually in America. What was the audience like for that?
Right. Imagine the energy in that room.
I can only imagine. I bet it was a pretty divided crowd.
You'd think so, right.
Mm-hmm.
But even before the debate started, 14% of the audience in Toronto agreed with the statement.
Wow, really? So even outside the U.S., that idea of America needing to be made great again, it was resonating.
Yeah, it really shows you how deeply that sentiment had taken hold. Okay, so on the Trump side, we've got Newt Gingrich, former Speaker of the House, and Laura Ingraham, the conservative commentator.
A formidable duo, for sure. What was their main line of argument?
Well, they came out swinging, painting a picture of America in utter decline.
Decline, how so?
They talked about a shrinking middle class, failing inner cities, trade deficits, you name it.
So they're really tapping into the sense of things not being what they used to be.
Exactly. They were playing to this feeling that America had lost its way.
Okay, so they're making the case that things are bad, but then how do they tie that back to Trump?
Well, that's where Gingrich got really interesting. He framed Trump's rise as part of a global anti-establishment wave. He compared it to Brexit, even to that comedian-backed mayor in Rome. Remember that?
Vaguely, yeah. It was all over the news.
Right. And his point was that these were all symptoms of people feeling deeply fed up with the status quo.
So they're positioning Trump as the antidote to that frustration.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, maybe you need an outsider, even if they're totally unconventional, to shake things up.
It's a risky strategy, but it clearly resonated with a lot of people. And Ingraham, what was her take?
Oh, she doubled down on that whole us versus them narrative.
Yeah.
She basically said that the same elites criticizing Trump were the ones responsible for the policies that created this perceived decline.
Classic populism, but effective nonetheless. So they've painted a bleak picture, blamed the establishment. What's their solution?
Trump, of course.
Right.
They presented him as the ultimate business guru, the guy who could swoop in and fix a failing system.
They're really leaning into his business background.
A big time. They argue that his experience in the business world made him uniquely qualified to make tough decisions, cut through red tape, get the economy booming again.
Did they get into specifics, like any particular policies?
They were big on tax cuts, deregulation, pretty standard Republican talking points, but packaged with Trump as this charismatic changemaker.
So they're trying to sell him as a different kind of Republican, someone who can actually get things done.
Right. And to add some weight to their claims, Gingrich even brought up his own experience with economic reforms during the Reagan and Clinton administrations.
Interesting. So appealing to a sense of history, of past successes.
Yeah, like, look, we've done this before and it worked. But it wasn't just about presenting their vision. They also spent a good chunk of time attacking the Clintons.
I'd imagine so, considering it was the 2016 election. Who were they going after specifically?
Hillary Clinton, mostly. They basically said she embodied everything wrong with the system.
Interesting. So they're not just attacking her policies, but her as a symbol.
Exactly. They portrayed her as the ultimate insider, benefiting from a rigged system while everyday Americans were struggling. They brought up the Clinton Foundation, paid speeches, potential conflicts of interest, anything to cast doubt on her character and trustworthiness.
It's a classic tactic, unfortunately. Instead of just debating the issues, they're trying to discredit their opponent on a personal level.
Right. And it's interesting because those attacks, they weren't just about policy differences. They were deeply personal, aimed at making people question her motives, her commitment to the average American.
It's a dangerous game, but it can be very effective.
Okay, so we've got this picture of America in crisis, according to Gingrich and Ingraham, and their solution is the business-savvy outsider, Donald Trump. But on the other side of the debate, we have a very different perspective.
Oh, I'm sure. So if Gingrich and Ingraham are painting a bleak picture, what's the counter-narrative?
Okay, so we've got these two competing narratives about the state of America, but it's not just about facts and figures, right?
Yeah.
It's about how those facts resonate with people's feelings.
Absolutely. Remember how we talked about Ingraham's tactic of labeling critics as elites? That's not just about policy, it's about tapping into an emotional sense of being overlooked and ignored.
It's like they're trying to create a sense of shared resentment, a feeling of being betrayed by the system. And, that resonates with people who feel like they've been left behind economically, socially, even culturally.
It's a powerful strategy and one that Trump and his supporters have mastered. They're not just selling a policy platform, they're selling a sense of belonging, a feeling of being heard and understood.
It's like a psychological appeal alongside a political one. And it's no wonder that some people were swayed by their arguments.
And Reich and Granholm, they countered with their own emotional appeals, but they tried to do it through humor. Remember Granholm's Dr. Seuss-style ode to Trump?
Oh, yeah, that was pretty clever. She basically used humor to paint him as a bit of a cartoon character, a childish figure who lacked the seriousness and experience to be president.
It's a bit of a risky tactic, right? Mocking your opponent can backfire if it makes them appear more relatable to voters.
True. But in this case, it felt more like an attempt to disarm him, to make him seem less intimidating, even a little silly. It was an effort to undermine his image as a strong, decisive leader.
And they didn't just rely on humor. Reich, for example, made a very direct, even confrontational argument about Trump's business record. He pointed out that if Trump had just invested in an index fund, he would have made more money than he claims to have made through his business dealings.
Wow, that's a really pointed argument, isn't it? It basically calls into question Trump's entire brand as a savvy businessman, suggesting his success was more about luck than skill.
It's a smart move because it challenges the very foundation of Trump's appeal to voters. If he's not as financially brilliant as he claims to be, maybe he's not the right person to fix the economy.
Exactly. And it's not just about his business acumen, right? They also brought up the whole issue of potential conflicts of interest, something that's become even more relevant today.
You're right. Granholm asked a powerful question. Would American foreign policy be for sale if Trump were elected? She was basically suggesting that his global business dealings could compromise his ability to act in America's best interests.
Whoa, that's a loaded question. And the timing was pretty prescient, considering all the questions about Russia's influence on Trump's campaign.
It's fascinating how these arguments, made in 2016, have become even more relevant in recent years. It shows how deeply those concerns about Trump's character, his potential for corruption, were already bubbling to the surface.
It's like this debate was a kind of preview of the political battles to come. It wasn't just about what Trump could do for America. It was about whether he could be trusted to do it.
And that's the core of the debate, isn't it? You have Trump's promise of make America great again, this idea of restoring America's greatness. But then you have these deep questions about whether he can even be trusted to act in a way that's truly beneficial for America.
It's a fascinating tension, and it really highlights how deeply divided the country was at that time. It's a stark reminder of the power of persuasion, of how easily we can be swayed by narratives and emotional appeals, especially when we're feeling frustrated and disillusioned. It's kind of wild how we can look back at something like this debate, and it's like holding up a mirror to today.
It really is. It's like those big questions just keep coming back around, you know?
Right.
Like, who gets to define what real America even means?
Exactly. And the thing is, both sides back then were offering a path to greatness, just not the same path.
Oh,
Of course, remind us again, what was the Gingrich-Ingraham approach?
yeah.
Besides Trump being the man, of course.
Right. Well, they were really leaning into that classic Republican playbook,
Yeah.
Economic growth, deregulation, smaller government. It was all about individual responsibility. The idea that if you just get the government out of the way, people can achieve their own American dream.
That classic bootstraps mentality.
Yeah.
But Reich and Granholm, they weren't buying it.
Yeah.
Or at least not all of it.
Yeah, they weren't arguing against the American dream itself. More like they saw a different way to get there. For them, it wasn't about less government, but about smarter government. They talked about investing in education infrastructure, creating a system that was actually fair for everyone, not just the wealthy.
So it becomes this fundamental debate about the role of government itself. Is it the problem or is it the solution? Or is it something in between?
Right. And that debate is woven into the fabric of America itself. But what's interesting is how both sides tried to connect their vision to this idea of American values. Gingrich and Ingraham, they really tapped into that sense of individualism, Self-reliance, that image of the rugged entrepreneur, it's a very potent image.
The lone cowboy making his fortune. But Reich and Granholm, they were appealing to something different, weren't they?
Exactly. For them, it was about fairness, opportunity for all, a sense of shared responsibility. It's a more community-minded vision, you might say, focused on the common good, not just individual success.
And that's a powerful message too, right? The idea that we're all in this together, that we have to look out for each other. So looking back, what do you think is the biggest takeaway from this whole debate? What's the lesson here?
I think it reminds us that politics aren't just about the numbers or the policies. They're about something much deeper, about our values, our beliefs, about what we want the future to look like. And honestly, those things are way more complicated than any one debate can capture.
Absolutely. And if anything, it feels like those fault lines, those divisions, they've only gotten deeper since 2016.
You're not wrong. But maybe that's all the more reason to revisit these conversations, to really listen to each other, even when it's hard, even when we disagree, because maybe that's where it starts with understanding.
Well said. Well, on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the 2016 Munk debate. We've unpacked the arguments, the tactics, and hopefully revealed some of those deeper values at play in this clash of ideologies.
It's a story that's still being written, of course, but hopefully looking back at this moment gives us all a little more context, a little more understanding of how we got to where we are today.
Thanks for joining us on this journey back to 2016. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a topic that's shaping our world. Until then, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep those conversations going.